Let's turn to some mixed news in the Massachusetts primary. There are three really, I want to say primary races, but I think it was more, but there were three key races here. One was Ed Markey being challenged by Joe Kennedy. Joe Kennedy, a sitting congressman in the 4th District of Massachusetts. Some people contend that there's just a branding difference between the two of them. I don't think that's quite the case. Nevertheless, Markey has been very aggressive with climate change, particularly the Green New Deal, other initiatives. What was also rather stunning about this, and I'm in favor of primaries. I mean, just broadly speaking, generically, I think there should always be primaries. Good. What was interesting was to watch the Democratic leadership, who you will recall, maintain that there is a blacklist against any political firm that would help challengers of incumbents. Now, I guess maybe technically the Democratic leadership was saying this in the House just about House challenges, not Senate challenges. But nevertheless, it makes it very hard to take them seriously, that there is some type of, principle in operation here, other than an ideological one. Joe Kennedy lost. He did win Worcester. I don't know how that happened, but he lost the rest of the state. Alex Morse lost pretty handily to Richie Neal in Massachusetts 1st District. This was, again, another Justice Democrat attempt to challenge one of the highest ranking members of the Democratic leadership, the chairman of the House and Ways and Means Committee, and a guy who really behind the scenes has a decent voting record, but behind the scenes sabotaged much of the progressive agenda in terms of like drug pricing, in terms of like the attempt to get Trump's tax returns. I mentioned this quite a bit yesterday. Medicare for all, fighting against. Remember, they had that hearing and they weren't allowed to use the words Medicare for all. That was Richie Neal who pushed that. But it was not enough. Local voters in Massachusetts, their concerns aren't maybe as national. And then in the 4th District, filling in for Kennedy's seat, it looks like Jake Auchincloss, and we don't know yet, a former Republican, is going to win that seat. There were multiple progressives running in that. The closest one was Jesse Mermel. And unfortunately, we don't know, it appears that the progressives split the vote. So, down the road, progressives got to get a little smarter. At one point, look at the polls. It happened with Mondaire Jones, and he won in New York. At one point, you got to look at the polls and say, where is the biggest opportunity for progressives? Even if it's not the progressive we want. Or not. And we now have a former Republican who's going to end up being, if he pulls it out, which it looks like he's going to, is going to be one of the most conservative members of the entire Democratic caucus. We may not need his vote. There may be another crack at him next time. But we shall see. Here is Ed Markey. Like we say, won fairly well, easily in Massachusetts, beating Joe Kennedy, the first Kennedy who's lost in Massachusetts, maybe ever. Here is Ed Markey.
In this race, justice was on the ballot. Healthcare justice. That's Medicare for all and universal health care. Educational justice. so that every student has access to first-class schools and well-paid teachers. Economic justice, so that 3 billionaires don't hold more wealth than the bottom 50 percentile of our population combined. That's an economic system that's gone off the rails. Racial justice, so that we confront our history, make reparations, and root out the systemic racism that keeps us from achieving the promise of liberty and justice for everyone. Today and every day, we say Black lives matter, Black voices matter. And environmental justice, that's the Green New Deal.
Liberty. So there's Ed Markey. Here's an example from the debate on one of the reasons why I think Joe Kennedy lost. I don't know how much of it was ideological. I mean, to a certain extent, there is in some quarters, it is impossible for a Kennedy to lose in Massachusetts. Here, though, I think it's why Kennedy couldn't win. One, in part, because Markey is a good senator. Here is Joe Kennedy. This is where you would expect a Kennedy to shine a little bit, frankly. But go ahead.
Congressman, what's your worst personality trait, or what does your wife think is your worst trait?
Those are going to be two very different things. Look, I think this is more information than you need. My wife does not like it when I does not like being anywhere near my feet. So feet on the couch is like the big thing that drives her nuts.
How about you, Senator Markey? What's your wife think is your worst habit, or what do you think is your worst trait?
My wife cannot believe how obsessed I am with the Red Sox, the Patriots, the Bruins, and the Celtics. She thinks it's a pathology. I tell her that we're genetically hardwired in Massachusetts. You're born a Democrat and a Red Sox fan, then you're baptized 7 days later.
That is what we call in Massachusetts, low-hanging fruit. Very low-hanging fruit. I love the Red Sox too much. What's my biggest weakness? My biggest weakness is probably that I work too hard. That's what it would be. It's one of those deals. That is the classic interview technique, and one would imagine he would have had that ready. But there you go.
Feet are not a personality trait.
I think Kennedy was trying to be too clever by half, going for the foot fetish vote in Massachusetts.
I don't know what was going on there, to be honest with you. But I put my feet on the couch. What?